Hello, everybody, and welcome or welcome back to the second shelf and to another recent reads on Sunday. My kind of semi-regular video on Sunday afternoon, in which I discuss the books that I've just finished or started or am currently reading. And yes, I know the jumper is wrinkled, and I just couldn't be bothered to iron it. I know. I should have, because you deserve an unwrinkled jumper, but I'm sorry, I just couldn't be bothered. So let's just ignore the wrinkles on the jumper and talk about the books. I have finished three, I think. One, two, three. Yes, three books that I want to talk to you about, and all three of them were nonfiction November books. And two of them were even on my TBR. Can you believe it? Who am I even? The first one I finished was a chunky one. Barbara Tuchman, The March of Folly, first published in 1984. So it's a good half century old, but still very much recommendable and topical for the present day. Barbara Tuchman was a writer of historical nonfiction. She wrote a book about the 14th century, the calamitous, a distant mirror, the calamitous 14th century, which I read earlier this year. And really loved. I thought it was brilliant. And so I decided to read more of her. And this book is about the follies in history that governments or semi-governments like the Pope, I mean, he's kind of a government, how they act and how they do policies that are clearly against their self-interest and are, stupid. Folly is a it's much more chic, the word, but it's just about stupid policies. So from the title says From Troy to Vietnam. And I read that for the first prompt of a nonfiction November, fraud, because it's self-deception. That's my interpretation of fraud. So what she does is she introduces the theme of governments acting against their own self-interest in a really stupid way, like what you see on the title, on the cover, the Trojan horse. Why on earth would the Trojans let this horse in? I mean, it's a wooden horse, so it's not going to get in by itself. But they could easily imagine that this is probably some sort of deception by the Greek. And why wouldn't you at least examine the horse before you, before you drag it into your city, and then the Greek soldiers hidden in the huge belly of the horse, get out and slaughter everybody. So Tuchman introduces that theme of folly, with examples like Troy. And then in the main part, she discusses she chooses a couple of incidents in history, like how the Catholic Church reacted against the reformers, the Lutherans, and that it could have easily been prevented, that the Christian Church was split in two. The same for the quote-unquote American colonies, how the English government reacted towards the demands of the colonists. Again, I mean, if you are in the US, you're probably happy that you are now the US and not part of the UK. But still, from the standpoint of the then British government, it was just stupid how they acted. And the last big example is Vietnam, the Vietnam War. I thought it was a really, really good book. If you're interested in these three, or at least two maybe of these three events in history, the Vietnam War, the split of the Christian Church, Catholic Church, and the independence of the British colonies in what is now the US. I can certainly recommend it. I will say, though, it is dense. So I couldn't, it's not, I mean, Barbara Tuchman writes engagingly and interestingly, but it is not, like narrative nonfiction, human interests, nice stories, anecdotes. No, it's really dense. So if that's not your thing in nonfiction, this book is probably not for you. But I think it was really, really good. I learned a lot, and the perspective of this self-deception of governments I thought was really interesting. So that was the first book I finished. The next one I finished was a relatively new release. I think it was earlier this year. Let me check. Yes, a couple of months ago. How to Think Like a Woman by Regan Panaluna. Regan Panaluna was a philosopher by trade. She studied philosophy, PhD, got into university as a scholar, and she switched professions, and she is now a journalist. This book is about forgotten 4 women philosophers who taught me how to love the life of the mind, but for more or less forgotten female philosophers, Mary Estelle, Wollstonecraft. So she picks 4 that are her main focus. This is not a book for you if you don't like philosophy or if you find philosophy boring. That's my first warning that I want to give. So if that all is not of interest to you, no, this is not a book for you. She combines the look at various female philosophers with her own journey through philosophy and the sexism she encounters as a young female philosopher, philosophy student, that, she was born, I think, in the 1960s. So it's current. It's not like 50 years ago when she studied philosophy, and she still encountered male professors who wouldn't discuss female philosophy, philosophers who would say, philosophy is something for men and women can't think properly, stuff like that. We all encountered that if we are female. So she tries to combine that. And I think that combination was what I thought was, and by the way, I read this for the Prompt Web. And for me, that is in my head a reference to Charlotte's Web. Charlotte the spider who tries to get Wilbur, the pig, saved by getting him out of the fact that he's completely unknown. She feels if he's really famous, nobody will kill him. So she takes him out of obscurity, and that's what this book also does. Female philosophers who are not that well known, trying to take them off obscurity. So Charlotte's Web, that was my link. Yeah, I know. Anyway, but the combination with the memoir was for me not that successful. I felt the parts where she talks about the life of these female philosophers, and she talks about more than those 4. Her main focus are the 4, Damaris Cudworth Masham, and then Mary Estelle, Catherine Cockburn, and Mary Wollstonecraft. And I think Mary Wollstonecraft is probably the one who is not that much in obscurity, but she talks about more than those. But those are the main focus, those 4. And I only knew Mary Wollstonecraft. The other 3 I have never heard of. And I studied philosophy as well. So there we go. So that part I thought was really well done. Interesting combination of the lives of these women, what they had to overcome in order to become thinkers, the broad strokes of their thinking, we are introduced to, I'm talking like Yodi, I mean, anyway, but the connection that she tries to make with her own life, I thought was just less successful and less interesting. But still, if you want to have a look at 4+ female philosophers that you might not have heard about, have heard of, and an introduction to those women, it's still worth a read. And the last book that I read was a buddy read with Heidi from my reading life, and also nonfiction, like I said, but not on my TBR, the video that I filmed for Nonfiction November. But it was still really, really interesting, and that is A Rebel in Gaza by Asma El Ghul, together with Selim Nassib, and translated from the French by Mike Mitchell. This book was published couple of years ago, 2016, in the original French, I mean Arabic French, but it was, the first publication was in France, in French, in 2016, and then in 2018 in this English translation. So Asma El Ghul is a Palestinian who grew up in Gaza. Her parents were refugees coming to Gaza, to the, refugee camp that Gaza is. Oh, and I want to say this book, obviously, because it was published in 2006, is before the war that is now happening. So it's not dealing with that. It is the essays about her life as a child, as a young girl, as a young woman in Gaza. A part of her life, 6 years she spent in the Arab Emirates when her father had a job there, but then they went back to Gaza, and Asma El Ghul now lives in France, by the way, since 6 years or something. And she cooperated with journalist Selim Nassib, journalist and writer, and together he helped her write this book. And I feel it's not, like my buddy reader Heidi said, rightfully, it's not a perfect book by any means, but it is extremely interesting it gives you a real idea how it is to live in Gaza. And she is, as a woman, critiquing everybody. She is critiquing, of course, the situation in Gaza, depending on international aid, the UN. She is critiquing Israel army, barging into her house every other day, so to speak. But she's also critiquing the Palestinian officials, government, whether it's Fatah or whether it's the Hamas. And again, this is before the war. So she is a real independent thinker, I would say, and it is not a plea for one of the parties, but it's the life of a woman, a child, and a girl, and a young woman in this tension between all those parties. And I feel we get a real good glance of this life, and also enough information if you are not somebody who knows the ins and outs of Palestinian history or Gaza, or the history of the Palestinian refuge, of the refugee history. It's a slim book, so she is not giving all the information, obviously, but enough, at least for me, it was enough that I really thought I could grasp something of the history and the historical context of it all, and what life is like there. So I can highly, highly recommend this one if you are interested in learning more about the history of Gaza and Palestinians. So those were the 3 books that I finished, or that I want to talk to you about. I'm about to finish another one, but I will talk to you about that next week. It's also fiction, so I thought, yeah, Anyway, babbling again. I just started this mammoth, a Mary Beard, Emperor, Emperor of Rome, that was gifted to me for my birthday by Kim from Middle of the Book March. Thank you again, Kim. And it is just what it says on the tin. Mary Beard is a British scholar, historian, and she mainly writes about ancient Rome. Her book, SPQR, about the Roman Empire, Roman history, is fantastic if you are interested in that. And this one looks at, as it says on the back, a new way of seeing the Roman Empire. It looks more closely at what it means to be an emperor of Rome, how that works, how details of the life. That's what I expect, and I'm really, it's heavy, but I'm really looking forward. I'm about 20 pages in, so not much to tell you about it. I will certainly talk about it some more when I am further in. And then after all these heavy-duty nonfiction books like the Toten and the Rebel in Gaza and now the Roman Emperor, I was in desperate need of some fluff. And Heidi from My Reading Life suggested, she had, I think, the same, that we just needed some brain candy to, clear the mind. And she suggested a book that I had never heard of, Dina Rayborn, A Curious Beginning, and it's a Veronica Speedwell mystery, the first in the series, published not that long ago, I would say. 2015. Okay, not that long ago in my world. And Veronica Speedwell, I always want to say Victoria, but her name is Veronica Speedwell. The book is set in the 1870s, so Victorian age, and Veronica is this very self-reliant, self-sufficient young woman, 25. She just lost her guardians and is now independent, not with means, but she knows how to get by, and she is into butterflies, so she is into natural history. She is an explorer. She went on quite some trips when you think that she's 25, and now she moves to London. And there's this mystery about her past. She is taken in by a baron, but then something happens and she has to explore the mystery. That's all I want to say. And it's just what I needed. It's very improbable, everything about her. She is this type of larger than life character, young woman, but it's such an easygoing, humorous, nice adventure that we are going on with her. So I'm really enjoying myself. In between all the heavy stuff. So those were the books I read and the two that I'm currently working on. I hope you've enjoyed this. Thank you very much for watching. I'm looking forward to your comments as always, even if it takes me 3 weeks to answer. Yes, I'm behind again, and I'll talk to you all soon in the next one.